This place was a steal. The real estate agent had told them that, and they could see it was true. Set high up on a windswept hill overlooking the sea, the modern 4-bedroom home looked out over a vast expanse of water, dotted only by the occasional sailboat. It was isolated, sure, but for a couple who liked their privacy, that was a bonus, not a negative. As soon as they moved in, they started to notice strange things. At first, it was just little things. When they hung pictures on the walls, they noticed that none of them cast shadows. They assumed that maybe the sun just wasn't hitting them at an angle that created shadows. But then one day they noticed that the potted plant on the windowsill also had no shadow. And then they started to notice that nothing in the house had a shadow. People, plants, furniture, pictures, nothing. They found this increasingly unnerving. And so they called the real estate agent and asked if anything weird had happened in the house in the past. The agent was puzzled by their call. Nothing weird had happened in the house, and she'd sold many homes in her career. Some were more normal than others, she said, but she couldn't recall anything unusual about this one. Still, she agreed to look into it. Meanwhile, the couple started doing their own digging. They spoke to the neighbors, a kindly elderly couple who had lived across the street for decades. They had no idea how long the house had been empty before their new neighbors moved in, but they did tell them that it had been a very long time. "Do you know who lived there?" they asked. The old man shook his head. "We never saw anyone come or go. The windows were always covered by those big white sheets. It was creepy, really." The couple thanked them for the information and went back home. They checked online records and discovered that the house had been built about 30 years ago, and yet it seemed like no one had ever lived there. There was no record of utility hookups or even garbage collection. Yet the house was in perfect condition. It had clearly been maintained. How could this be? The real estate agent called them back, having spoken to an old friend of hers who had worked as a realtor in the area 30 years ago. Apparently, the house had been the talk of the town when it was built because it was such an eyesore. The local zoning commission had approved the construction of a Lurie's apartment complex in that location, but the developer had other plans. He wanted to build a luxury home instead, so he bribed a few zoning officials and broke ground anyway. Construction on the house took a couple years, because the materials had to be brought in by barge and then hauled up the steep hill. But eventually, it was finished. It was clear that the developer hadn't spent the money on the cheapest materials. The house was built to last. Still, no one had moved in. What was the problem? Well, the answer came in the form of an old newspaper article that the couple found. The developer had made a lot of enemies when he built the house, mostly because he ignored the building codes. The house wasn't up to par and it was dangerous. The local fire marshal condemned the building and the developer was arrested. The house was seized and auctioned off to recoup the cost of the investigation and the lost revenue from the illegally built apartments. But after all that, the house was still empty. Why? Well, according to the locals, it had to do with what the developer had done to get the house built in the first place. They said that he'd made a deal with someone very powerful, but when he tried to make good on his end of the bargain, the person he'd made the deal with didn't hold up their end. The developer was never supposed to have gotten the house built, and now he was paying the price. Some people might have scoffed at these stories, but this couple wasn't so sure. They had felt nothing but emptiness when they toured the house, and now they were starting to feel something else. Fear. Whatever was inside those walls, it had been here for 30 years, waiting for someone to let it out. And now it was too late to turn back. They had already signed the papers, establishing that they were the new owners. This place was a steal, the real estate agent had said. But now they knew the real reason why.